The job? Killer is dead.
The last video covered Lollipop Chainsaw, a whimsical and bloody tale conjured up by Suda 51 with a world spearheaded by James Gunn that took us on a zombie-slaying adventure with cheerleading star Juliet. Time to take a real sharp turn from kooky referential humor as we make our way to Killer is Dead. Planning for this project began within Grasshopper around the end of 2009, but proper development started 2 years later with Suda as head writer and Hideyuki Shin as director, an ex-Konami dev known for nothing notable, but hey, he worked on Silent Hill 4. The game was officially announced in April of 2012 with a bit of concept art. Suda 51 said in early interviews that he wanted to give the game a James Bond feel.
For this title, there isn't specifically a Bond movie in mind, just 007 as a series. He's a British agent that goes into different places, different countries to solve something. That was the backbone of how we created this.
While it is obviously not a sequel to Killer 7, it does have an emphasis on assassins. Mondo Zappa, our main character, is part of a small syndicate, hired to take on dangerous missions to eliminate a target that can prove to be the downfall of our country if they are not neutralized. Diving into the game, you play as Mondo, an assassin who wields a katana and cybernetic arm that transforms into different weapons. So you've got the hacking, the slashing, the shooting, and collecting blood from fallen enemies that make you more powerful. Bloody action drenched in very unique shading effects. This all seems a little familiar, huh?
We named the shading of the characters and environments High Contrast Shader. It's not like cell shading, realistic shading, or comic book shading. We wanted to come up with something original, something nobody had seen before. That's the style we went for.
In the core gameplay, taking on small hordes of enemies, you're enticed to build your combo without stop. Every hit raises your combo. The higher the number, the faster you are. The crux of your abilities is the Dodge Burst, similar to the Dark Step from No More Heroes. Critically dodging an enemy grants you moments where you can slice them up super fast. Faster! Faster, goddammit! And about your cybernetic arm, the Muscleback. It is mainly utilized as a ranged weapon to shoot cupcake-looking bullets at enemies from afar, but you can also attain add-ons so the Muscleback can perform different kinds of attacks. There's an upgrade system to increase your combat options. Pretty basic stuff, but it all works well. Outside of the main campaign, you can do side missions. The objective can be a number of things. Find enemies or items that are scattered across the stage, protect yourself from hordes, escape areas within a time limit, things like that. There's also Gigolo mode. Go on dates where you keep staring at girls in their underwear, give them gifts, hear the same voice clips over and over again, and eventually fuck them. Yeesh. Alright, enough of that. What's the story about? Mondo Zappa works for the Bryan Execution firm, named after its owner. This syndicate is a small group of assassins who are sent out to kill otherworldly beings that pose great threat to the sanctity of our society and even our planet.
It's gotta be the real deal. So, Mondo, do you have it all?
Yeah, I've got it covered.
All right then. After careful consideration, we decided to take on your case. However, I do need to inform you that the function of this office is execution. You got any problem with that?
Execution?
Yeah. Well, this is a monster.
It's a monster.
Right, a monster.
We kill monsters!
That okay with you?
Yes.
Fine. Now we need the $10,000 up front for our services.
What? Isn't the state supposed to pay for the execution?
The execution, yes. But cleanup of the body parts and gore is not cheap.
Vivi, why don't you just calculate the expenses at the end?
Chief, not again.
A fitting task for our newest employee. Wouldn't you agree, Mondo?
Please check back with our office in 1 week, and we'll give you a status report on our progress. Now, if you could please sign on the line.
But of course, we won't keep you waiting an entire week.
In between getting hot and heavy with these... I'm gonna need to ask you for a favor and never do that again. He and his crew take down villains of ridiculous proportions. It's up to Mondo and company to destroy these grotesque foes, the most significant being David, who seems to have a connection with Mondo.
You really are clueless about everything, aren't you?
Now what? In case you haven't noticed, I'm not a patient guy.
Yeah, that's right. You only eat soft-boiled eggs. Heck of a diet.
How do you know that?
As you're killing your targets, it appears that these executions are eating away at Mondo, like he's being consumed by the dark energy that he takes in with every kill. You also learn more about his past, such as his early interest in government work.
No, I think working for the government suits me.
And eventually why David is so important to him. Throughout this adventure, taking place in both dreams and the real world, it ends with a confrontation between Mondo and David. But what our hero didn't know is that taking him out would mean the end of his mortality.
You don't understand, do you? Do not forget. You and I are bound together by the same blood.
Killer is dead.
As he would dethrone a king.
I see. I understand now. So that's how it is. David.
Defending the Earth from the dark side of the moon meant his fate would be ultimately sealed.
Well,
Into the moon's new ruler. That is story of Killer is Dead. How was is for me? Well, I like the core gameplay. I think Suda and his gang are finally getting the hang of the Unreal Engine. Still a few mishaps here and there, but functions more cleanly than Shadows of the Damned and Lollipop Chainsaw. Hack and slash mechanics feel excellent for the most part. It's extremely satisfying when you're knee deep in ghoulies but manage to perfect dodge their offense back to back and chew through them. Unfortunately, Killer is Dead tends to lose focus on the core gameplay, and that happens more often than I'd like. Among the 13 scenarios, a noticeable chunk of them are, I guess we can call them non-stages. This is where the game's poor pace is at its most apparent. The first scenario is a non-stage, you just walk forward. Next is another non-stage, serves as a short tutorial and nothing more. Third scenario, thankfully, serves as an actual stage, but is very short and compact. To me, this wasn't a good way to introduce how most of the stages are then on. I also find it extremely bizarre how this is the second time in a video game I'm experiencing a world based on Alice in Wonderland and it's all very cubic and boxed in. What's the correlation? I understand wanting to deviate from the hacking, the slashing, and the killing. You want to mix up your formula, get the variety flowing. But some of these scenarios are just not very intuitive or fun. As for the side content, the extra missions are fine. They took particular scenarios of the main campaign and expanded upon them. It's what one would expect, really. Cheers to them being able to make post-game content this time around. Shadows of the Damned could have used some fun mini-games like this. Also, if you haven't gotten a chance to try Killer is Dead, I'd recommend the PC version, which is where all this footage is from. You can rig it to 60 FPS with a quick fix and don't have to deal with ridiculous screen tears. Let me tell you, playing the PS3 version of this for a year, dark times. Killer is Dead's presentation is also excellent. The cell shading combined with smooth animation and effects make for a beautiful game. Combine that with Akira Yamaoka's diverse expertise in composition, and you've got yourself a delicious treat to the senses. Anything I'm missing? Guess I can share my thoughts on the Gigolo missions. Look, I don't have a problem with the core concept, dating simulators, or sexual content, obviously. But this stuff is just embarrassing.
I'll cherish this present from you, Mondo-san. I want to stay like this, but please don't stare so much. You're making me blush.
Maybe if there was more to them, like dialogue choices, or maybe just dialogue?
Fascinating.
Fascinating? What is? He isn't saying anything. Praise the Lord I found out about this easy exploit to get the meter maxed out almost immediately and finish these stupid dates quicker. All you gotta do is hit the zoom button and move the stick around a bit during the glass animation. Rack up guts instantly. Thanks, Koopy. Suda51 has expressed that this Gigolo mode nonsense wasn't his idea, but rather a mutation of an old concept he had, and the sexualizing aspect was pushed by Kadokawa, the main publisher.
Those missions were actually supposed to be part of Shadows of the Damned. The original concept was you were supposed to give flowers. It was more of a non-erotic mission. Then I got a request from Kadokawa saying, "We're going to sell this game in Japan. We need more scandalous stuff." I wanted the mode to be a little bit cleaner, but it came from the top down that I had to add that in there.
I mean, that is the country with an endless supply of visual novels like this. So I can see where they're coming from, and Paula was originally just a gun and not his girlfriend, so being single and having dates with women or something like that makes sense. Sounds like if they kept Suda's idea as it was, it would have made Mondo kind of delightful and silly. It'd have been really cute seeing him be a little more pleasant and not fucking creepy. And if they had more time to flesh out the idea, it probably would have ended up less shallow. But hey, I respect the hustle, Mondo. These ladies are apparently the only means to new upgrades like the drill and freeze cannon. You know, if you think about it, Mondo is the one putting himself out to these women. At least in a gameplay perspective. How about the writing? Is it the grand return of our darling Suda51's crazy deep narrative and incredible symbolism from ye old Killer 7 days, in which just about everything is taken into account, making for an amazing story? Not really, despite that it was what the company was aiming for.
It's the first game in the Assassin series that Grasshopper Manufacture has worked on in a while, a title that picks up where Killer 7 and No More Heroes left off.
There's no denying the similarities the two games share with their premise and presentation. It's pretty clear that Suda wanted himself and his gang to get in a mindset similar to the company's mid-2000s days. Spirituality, dark past haunting the main characters, etc. While both Killer 7 and Killer is Dead share many similarities, including sales figures, it doesn't take much to see why the old GameCube gem was able to garner a serious cult following, even before the recent Steam port. Why didn't Killer is Dead get any real recognition almost 6 years later? Well, as I've said before, Killer 7 certainly went for amazing symbolism in its storytelling that made it feel like a tale of galactic proportions, where nearly everything connected so congruently. Killer is Dead feels like they tried to do the same thing, but went too literal with that matter. The story itself does seem to bear symbolism, some of them are outright explained in descriptions, others feel completely disconnected to the rest of the story. Well, as far as I can tell at least. I can't help but think particular examples are meant only to be taken at a surface level, or just methods of Deus Ex Machina, if not both. I think something that helped Suda dish out Killer 7's amazing story might have to do with the fact that he went on a complete media blackout when working on that game. While he is influenced by Western culture, he didn't really look to achieve anything that felt specific to any movie, book, or what have you. Suda has said plenty of times that the idea behind Killer's Dead came from wanting to make a James Bond-esque character. And I think plenty of the bosses have some clear inspirations in their design. Some Cronenberg, some Carpenter, some Araki? Wait, that's not even Western. Perhaps he got too tied up with how he wanted the story to be presented and looking at other famous works for inspiration. But I digress. These influences in the game were also likely to come about from other writers, other designers, or the lead director.
Travis, hello?
Smooth, sly, stylish. Mondo Zappa is a man of class, a man of taste. With his custom-made dress pants, St. Laurent black dress shoes, Armani collared shirt with blazer ensemble, and solid black Medusa silk tie. He's quite the man of a refined and expensive tastes. If you're willing to go for some style but can't foot the bill for Mondo's suit, maybe you could scoop some style up from Sukaban NYC. Catch some wandering eyes with the Shitai Ona Ringer tee. Check out all their other badass streetwear through the link below. So, I noticed a lot of people seem to have accepted the consensus that the story in Killer is Dead is utterly senseless tripe. While I do agree that it doesn't appear to have a narrative as deep or spiritually invested as Killer 7, or even feels as congruent, I think it's too dismissive to say Killer is Dead didn't try to go for some underlying themes. If there's at least one thing I think Killer is Dead was able to pull off, it's what I consider the most important part of storytelling: providing an interesting main character. Mondo Zappa is whom I want to discuss first and foremost as we cover how Killer is Dead relates to the themes of individualism, society, and death. Regarding individualism, it's expressed through Mondo's character and how he's used in the setting of Killer is Dead. When it comes to a Japanese game having a single unique main character for their action game, they usually give them a fashion sense that feels wildly expressive, if not obnoxious. Dante and his signature red coat with black boots, Cloud's spiky hair, shoulder pad, and ridiculously high waist belt. Hell, even Travis's t-shirt and jacket attire is pretty distinct, especially with his faux hawk. Mondo, on the other hand, doesn't look very unique. His plain hair, square glasses, and even his suit. He just looks like Barney from How I Met Your Mother, or a government agent, which are typically depicted as interchangeable. Not all action games go for ridiculous character designs, but most do. Compare this to David. Joe jokes aside, his attire matches his demeanor perfectly. He's a power-hungry megalomaniac who wants to rule the world, and his gold-braced suit with crown screams that.
Can't you tell just by looking? I'm acquiring unparalleled power. Do you like my outfit? Quite fitting for a ruler.
You seriously plan to conquer the world wearing that? You look like a male model in a cheap underwear ad.
Meanwhile, Mondo doesn't care for power, the ability to rule, or even his expertise at assassinating. He looks at these missions as a job, nothing more. The two brothers couldn't be more different.
I hope you realize the gravity of executing me. Do you?
Nope, not a clue. Okay, cat burglar, open your eyes. It's time to die.
He's less interested in killing these otherworldly beings with his amazing abilities and more about talking to beautiful women. Sure, Travis started his adventure because he wanted to have sex with Sylvia, but even he loved climbing the ranks and murdering everyone that got in his way. Not Mondo. He wants only one of the most ancient desires a man has: women. I think his design, attire, and personality express true individualism very well. Deep down, he's not really that different from your smooth-talking Joe Schmo.
It's the story of a man who doesn't show himself much in the public world, but still worms his way into society and mercilessly eliminates the evil dispersed in it. It's a personal story, not one that's conscious of the chaos going on in the real world.
But there's one thing I think expresses his individuality greatly. Prepare your tinfoil hats for this, we're definitely diving into some crackpot territories. I want to briefly touch on a real-life person of history, Osama bin Laden. I imagine everyone watching this is aware that he was the head terrorist that put forth the plan that led to the destruction of the World Trade Center back in September 11th, 2001. Something that's lesser known is his relationship with Central Intelligence. Being an insurgent towards Russian meddling meant he would be a valuable asset to them. The CIA would fund and promote his actions in order to help thwart said meddling. Bin Laden and his group would later begin making serious moves to taking over particular resources in the area that would eventually become vital to American interests. A bunch of clashing political, economic, and religious motivations led to the events of September 11th. The actual timeline of events and motivations is subject to wild speculation by a select few, but the events of the terrorist attack scarred the public's collective consciousness and became fuel for a lot of media. So with all that, bin Laden was taken out by US forces in 2011. This supposedly was according to the CIA's plan. The government, or the state, took out an evil they helped create with yet another creation of their own. Killers killing killers. And that's how the story goes. Except the real story is a lot more mundane and not so Hollywood. Now one might think, why the fuck am I bringing up Osama bin Laden? What does he have to do with Killer is Dead? Well, Suda51 was the lead writer, coming up with the setting and story. In early interviews, he had some peculiar things to say about conceptualizing the game.
It'll never be set in the actual game, but the concept is that Mondo was one of the assassins that killed Osama bin Laden. And in this world, when there's somebody that's really bad and they have this malice within them, when you execute them, that malice will be transferred to the person who killed them. Mondo was part of the team that took down bin Laden. Mondo's arm got infected, but that's not explained in the game. That's just the concept, where the basis of the game started from.
Interesting, right? Like he said, it isn't something outright stated in the game itself, but I think this makes it plausible that the concept of Mondo Zappa himself came from this idea of the government creating monsters out of sole individuals used to their advantage in order to keep enemies at bay, and then dispose of once their usefulness has run out.
It's kind of like a dangerous group for another dangerous group, a poison for poison. I wanted to write a story that would depict the dark side of the world, and this is the result of what we got.
It's funny to see him describe these characters as poison killing poison, because putting it so simply should show that it's not really a good idea. Mondo was already seeking government work before he attained the muscle back, which was provided by the state, so it's likely something they created in order to take advantage of whomever would wield it, which ended up being Mondo. The cybernetic arm he sports was created in order to take down David, another government agent who eventually went rogue and left the country's jurisdiction in order to gain ultimate power in the dark side of the moon. How about Brian, though? He runs for this syndicate that works for the state, first and foremost. Did his cybernetic enhancements come from the government as well? Why does he never seem to get infected? He was even a killer long before Mondo. It's a safe assumption that Brian actually gets the cybernetic enhancements through his own means, unbeknownst to the state. That would also explain Mondo's muscle back appearing more organic than Brian's, more advanced. I feel it's worth bringing up a particular line when he replaces the cybernetic half of himself near the end of the game.
He spent all our money from this job on his stupid modifications. Unbelievable.
Brian seems to work as a private contractor for the state, but keeps them at arm's length so as to maintain his own complexion and well-being. However, he embraced their wicked ways as time went on, according to the closing dialogue he had with Mondo's predecessor, Damon.
Tell me, did you accept the darkness?
I devoured it entirely.
What was happening to Damon in this act is identical to what Mondo was experiencing near the end of the story. Note the vein-like roots overcoming their bodies. The evils he rid from this world were consuming him, and just like Damon, Mondo is merely pinned as the next target for his syndicate as his usefulness has run out.
Please execute this man.
Plan in the making long before his corruption, all while beginning to build his own empire of rebellion, similar to David as he was conquering the moon with the wires. I believe there are more correlations to be found in Killer's Dead stories and other parts of bin Laden's terror history, such as how he founded Al-Qaeda during his time, a somewhat safe haven for his group where the government has considerably less reach, similar to David's annexation to the moon. Al-Qaeda's belief was largely that the creator of the Caliphate, or Muslim state, could only be completed after ridding the world of Western influence, thus committing attacks on countries of said influence, such as the events of September 11th. Sounds kind of like how David creates the wires in the moon and sends them to parts of the Earth, all in order to tear down at the planet in order to begin spreading the moon's influence as his plan to take over said Earth. I think it's possible that these real-world events could have inspired how the creators wanted to go about both Mondo and David, to an extent. While I highly doubt Suda or Shin will ever outright say this is what they were going for regarding their character arcs, I think the correlations these have with the history of the world's most infamous terrorists are more than coincidental. Alright, that's enough heavy political talk. Next would be society. We get a good idea of what kind of people this dark power attracts. Monsters, ghosts, shapeshifters, possessors, even aliens. Many use as pawns to help the wires invade Earth, or seeking assistance from Brian's team in order to foil David's plan and maintain their own sanctity. If not just for sheer vengeance.
I wanted to show the story and narrative of what goes on in the dark side of society that we will never be able to witness for ourselves.
Lastly, there's death. Besides being the main part of the professional description,
The job? Killer is dead.
the significance of death seems to be similar to what is represented in both Killer 7 and No More Heroes. Not just how the main character looks at the concept of death, but also how this endurance is influencing their state of mind. Mondo's killing ability mixed with the design of the muscle bag make for a combination that eventually led to the person's own ruination. Keep killing these beings with wicked intent, and the evil dwelling inside them will eventually consume you entirely.
Good luck, kid. One day, you may have to walk this path too. And on this job, you always come face to face with darkness. That's why you gotta find a beacon of light that'll never succumb to it. Thank you. Those are words I won't forget.
Considering his background, how his predecessor attempted to warn him of this fate since he was faced with death due to the profession, and David embracing Mondo's darkness within, it appears to be this endless cycle where the only real gain is to the state, while those involved in it firsthand suffer the most. So, something else worth discussing. While I feel I explained fairly well why Killer is Dead has some deep flaws, I think it got a bad rep right out the gate. Some of the more typical criticisms were certainly granted, like the strange structure of the gameplay, and the story can be hard to follow at times. Doesn't help that some of the dialogue is complete drivel.
So, you're suggesting that this creature is what's responsible for all the recent disappearances?
That's only speculation, of course.
Speculation? The truth is often found buried deep within speculation. In fact, some monsters can only be uncovered through speculation.
But you know what really had those game journals look down on this title? The Gigolo missions. While I've already expressed how boring and senseless they are, it seems as though this brought down the entire experience exponentially when it came to a lot of these reviews back in 2013. They're acting like all the women in this game are only depicted in these missions, and that these dumb dates take up 60% of the campaign, and not like 6%. If you ask me, most of the female characters in the main campaign are interesting in their own right, as long as they're given that time to shine.
To favor wine over human blood. Now that's foolish. Wouldn't you agree?
Would you mind telling me then, what you favor?
You still don't know. There's no end to my curiosity. I'm always seeking richer blood, stronger blood.
Will my blood be able to satisfy you?
You want to find out?
I beg of you, don't make me use my sword anymore. It's too filthy. In the presence of your beauty.
Shit, if anything, this just shows how vain Mondo is. Not that I'm about to complain about their depiction of men through a single character moment, I'm not an idiot. Like I said before, the dates are pretty embarrassing, and maybe the package would have been better if they were cut altogether. But to say it brings down the entire experience drastically is an exaggeration. I'm sure people out there can think of plenty of awful parts in video games that didn't stop it from becoming one of their all-time favorites. The funny thing is, Suda would probably agree with everyone talking about how lame Gigolo mode is. As he stressed before, it wasn't his decision, and the design of it was left to the game's director, Hideyuki Shin.
There was a strong request from our publisher, Kadokawa Games, to include sexy female characters. We originally only had Vivienne and Mika. We had just finished an earlier project, Lollipop Chainsaw, and I really didn't want there to be this image of grasshopper equals erotic.
This is a harbinger of things to come. The important thing to take from this is that Killer is Dead, while bearing a good chunk of that grasshopper essence, is also a testament to Suda having further issues with publishers as they fight against what he wants his company to stand for, and most importantly, what he wants to make. So what did we learn? Well, this may not be Suda's grand return to a deep narrative driving a galactic tale riddled with symbolism, but it still proves to be a unique and interesting adventure that's certainly worth analyzing. Killer is Dead has a lot more going on within the framework than you might think at first. While the game has some gaping faults in its design, the core gameplay is very gratifying, and the story has many facets of intrigue going on, so long as you take the time to look at all the details a little closer. With that said, I think Killer is Dead has plenty to offer for fans of Grasshopper's work, as well as people looking for an interesting and unique game. Coming up next will be a whole new venture and Grasshopper's first step into the next generation. Join me next time as we discuss one of the most ambitious free-to-play games known as Let It Die. Thanks for watching. Another big shout out to Sukaban NYC. Big thanks to Chaseface for providing his voice for the video. Check out his stuff. He made a Sonic video that was hated by a lot of Sonic fans. That means it has to be pretty good. Big shout out to my lovely patrons for continuing to support me, especially some new ones, such as Fungo. I'd hug you, but I'm afraid I'd get mycosis. Also, you're like a million miles away. And Hammondbeat. Hammondbeat? Real quick, Hammondbeat. Grab your right eyebrow with your index finger and thumb for a second. Now just pull. Did you get a single lash? That one's lucky. Keep it. Free advice. If you'd like to support my channel, consider visiting my Patreon page and maybe join my Discord chat with me and others about many things. Or some things. What else? Hit that bell thing down there? I don't know.